accused the CCP of concealing the pandemic truth, but forced to flee abroad. Goldman Sachs joins other banks in cutting forecasts for China's economy. Uniqlo and Zara's owners face lawsuit over complicity with CCP's Uighur labor abuses. Decades-old tech-sharing deal between US and China reevaluated. Second-generation Reds show allegiance to Xi Jinping, but they are tacitly wary of each other. Yang Min, a family member of a victim of the COVID pandemic in Wuhan, was threatened by Chinese Communist Party, or CCP, authorities many times because she demanded that they be held accountable for concealing the epidemic in China. She went to the Netherlands on June 15th to seek asylum to avoid being arrested and persecuted. Yang Min's 24-year-old daughter, Tian Yuxi, was infected with coronavirus in early 2020. Because Yang Min believed CCP experts' claims that the virus was preventable, controllable, and non-infectious, she did not take her child to the hospital for treatment. Her daughter's condition deteriorated rapidly, and she passed away in just a few days. Yang Min said that if she had known this disease was so contagious, she would have promptly taken her daughter to the hospital for treatment. She lost her beloved daughter simply because she believed the CCP's claim that there is no clear evidence of human-to-human transmission. Since then, she began to accept interviews from foreign media. On May 11, 2020, she took to the streets to protest the injustice of losing her child, carrying a photo of her daughter and the two lines, "The government concealed the truth about the pandemic," and "Return my daughter." She submitted a complaint at a Wuhan Municipal Party Committee's office, but was forcibly dragged away by 4 men. Yang Min was the first victim's family member to take to the streets to protest, so she became a key control target of the Wuhan authorities. Her mobile phone was monitored. Someone guarded her door 24/7, and the CCP forbade her from going out and tried to force her to give up her rights. In February this year, Yang Min helped call for the rescue of Zhang Hai, a family member of a COVID victim who was arrested for speaking out for rights. As a result, she was more strictly controlled by Wuhan authorities. Feeling that her arrest was imminent, Yang Min decided to flee abroad. Cheng, a friend of Yang Min, said families of the victims of the COVID pandemic are living in difficult circumstances, and those who dare to speak up and ask for the CCP to be held accountable face jail. Yang Min is a responsible and courageous woman. She single-handedly held up a placard demanding the CCP be held liable, and we admire her. Goldman Sachs has joined the list of banks revising their forecasts for China's economy downward, citing limited options to stimulate growth. Bloomberg reported that, according to a report on June 18th, analysts at Goldman have lowered their estimates for China's gross domestic product, or GDP, growth this year from 6% to 5.4%. The bank believes that any forthcoming policy measures to boost the economy will be unlikely to surpass those implemented during previous downturns, including steps taken in 2020. A report by Bloomberg economists stated that relying on traditional methods, such as using property and infrastructure to engineer an economic rebound, would not align with the Chinese leadership's emphasis on high-quality growth. The report highlighted the need for alternative strategies to achieve sustainable economic development. Last week, there were expectations of increased policy support, including government spending on infrastructure and easing measures in the property market. Some analysts even speculated that the Chinese central government might issue special-purpose bonds to fund various projects. The downward revision of China's 2023 GDP growth forecasts by major banks continued last week. Nomura, a Japanese bank, announced that it had lowered its forecast from 5.5 to 5.1%. Other banks, including UBS, Standard Chartered, Bank of America, and JP Morgan, had also made similar revisions. The revised forecasts now place China's GDP growth between 5.1 and 5.7% this year, down from the previous range of 5.5 to 6.3%. On June 15th, data showed that China's economy faced challenges in May, as industrial output and retail sales growth fell short of expectations. This reinforced the belief that the Chinese government would need to implement further measures to support the country's post-pandemic recovery, which remains fragile. Responding to the economic situation, China's central bank reduced the interest rate on its one-year medium-term lending facility on June 15th, marking the first easing in 10 months. This move sets the stage for potential cuts in next week's benchmark loan prime rates, or LPR. The Chinese regime has set a modest GDP growth target of about 5% for this year, after significantly missing its 2022 target. The European Uighur Institute has filed a new complaint against Uniqlo parent Fast Retailing, Zara owner Inditex, and Skechers, alleging that these two retail brands fostered human rights abuses in Xinjiang and other parts of China. The institute's president, Dilnur Rehan, says these companies are involved in the surveillance, the management, and the construction of camps, as well as the overall monitoring of the Uighur region. She argues that retailers have turned a blind eye to the Chinese Communist Party, or CCP's, human rights abuses and profited from forced labor in China. Nikkei cited Rehan saying, "It's up to the economic players to show that their products are not sullied by forced labor." The CCP has long been accused of human rights abuses and genocide against the Uyghurs of Xinjiang. Furthermore, it is also accused of building huge labor camps to illegally detain Uyghurs and force them to harvest cotton in Xinjiang, which produces about 20% of the world's cotton. The European Uyghur Institute pointed to the success of the US implementation of the Uyghur Forced Labor Prevention Act. Since the third quarter of last year, nearly 49% of apparel, footwear, and textiles imported from China were rejected by the US on suspicion that they were products produced by forced labor. Rehan said, "We have seen a vertiginous drop in products imported into the United States from China, but an increase in Europe, which claims to be the bastion of human rights." The institute hopes to convince the European Parliament to take a stricter stance on goods produced with forced labor in China. The White House is reviewing whether the U.S. should continue with the U.S.-China Science and Technology Agreement, or STA, after it expires at the end of this year. The deal, which was signed in 1979, promoted collaboration between both countries on scientific research. But now, Washington and Beijing are increasingly at loggerheads on multiple issues. Scientific advances have also allowed China to beef up its military might, enough to stir alarm among U.S. officials. According to Reuters, the majority supported the renewal of the pact, arguing that it allowed the U.S. a rare window into China's technical development. But more officials have tilted toward ending it, especially as bilateral ties are reaching their worst levels. Representative Mike Gallagher, chairman of the House Select Committee on China, said, "Extending the Science and Technology Agreement between the U.S. and China would only further jeopardize our research and intellectual property. The administration must let this outdated agreement expire." China is known for state-sponsored theft of trade secrets, which prompted the Trump administration to launch a trade war against Beijing in 2018. It also has policies that force U.S. companies to share their technology and intellectual property with local firms. Regarding legal challenges, China is accused of abusing its courts and patent panels to prioritize local firms. In 2021, a Chinese court ruled the Japanese conglomerate Hitachi violated its antitrust law, after the firm declined to license its technology to a Chinese rival. This year, foreign companies are shivering over China's expanded counter-espionage law. It is cracking down on foreign due diligence firms and restricting overseas access to its academic databases. The White House has no interest in letting China outpace the U.S. As Reuters cited, U.S. Indo-Pacific Coordinator Kurt Campbell has said, "Technology will be the cutting-edge arena of global competition in the period ahead, in the way nuclear missiles were the defining feature of the Cold War." Recently, more than 200 second-generation Reds, the sons and daughters of Chinese political elites who were born in the 1960s and early 1970s, before the end of the Cultural Revolution, gathered in Beijing to pay their respects to the party and Xi Jinping. They said that during 3 years of COVID, they all obediently stayed home, so no one sacrificed. However, some sources revealed that these Hong Erdai are leftists, and they and Xi Jinping have always been wary of each other. According to the China Flag Net, on June 8th, the Guanjing Hotel in Beijing celebrated the 15th anniversary of the founding of the Choir of the Descendants of the Founding Generals. This choir was established in September 2008 and has more than 200 members. Its current commanders are Ma Guochao, son of Ma Benjai, commander of the Hui Detachment of Dijiang Military Region of the 8th Route Army, the predecessor of the People's Liberation Army, and He Xiaoming, the daughter of the former Deputy Prime Minister of China's State Council, He Long, holds the position of political commissioner. The choir opened the ceremony with the famous Chinese Communist Party, or CCP, song, "The East is Red." Later, Wang Yali, deputy head of the choir, said in a speech that the leadership of the choir is united and consistent with the party central committee, with Xi Jinping at its core. They very obediently stayed home during the pandemic. No one sacrificed, and so on. In an interview with Da Jiyuan on June 14th, a Hong Erdai in Beijing said he had heard about this incident, but people in Beijing are accustomed to this kind of event, so its impact was not significant. He also said many Hong Erdai now are too old. They are all 70 to 80 years old and can't do much. They can only show off and brag about the glory of their parents to have the opportunity to make some money. But the Xi Jinping regime doesn't accept this and does not rely on them, so the two sides are wary of each other. As we all know, Xi Jinping's 3-year zero-COVID policy has caused continuous humanitarian disasters, leading to discontent within and without the system, including Hong Erdai. For example, Ran Jitiang, a real estate tycoon and Hong Erdai, who once called Xi Jinping a stripped naked clown who insisted on being an emperor, was sentenced to 18 years in prison. At the end of last year, Xie Xiaoqin, the daughter of Xie Fuji, the former Minister of Public Security of China, due to dissatisfaction with anti-pandemic measures, took a kitchen knife and threatened the anti-pandemic staff that she would slash them if they dared to step forward. At the end of last year, Ma Xiaoli, the daughter of veteran Ma Wenrui, wrote an article publicly criticizing Xi's pandemic prevention policy. Ma Xiaoli was a childhood friend of Xi Jinping, and her father, Ma Wenrui, had a close relationship with Xi Zhongxun, Xi Jinping's father. In addition, according to VOA, before Xi Jinping amended the constitution in March 2018 to remove restrictions on the president's re-election, the Hong Erdai writer Ma Bo and others had openly opposed the abolition of the national leadership term. In February 2021, a video also circulated online showing that Yang Xiaoping, son of Lieutenant General Yang Yong, said on his 80th birthday that he has the confidence to see the day when China will implement constitutional democracy. It will be a great change not seen in a century.